Adobe Fresco has a lot of unique motion tools that makes it really easy to create fun looping animations, like this little guy. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this one step by step so that you can make your own fun little looping animations. It's a lot easier than you might think. I doodled this little weird skateboarding monster. I thought he would be fun to animate. I especially like this exaggerated leg that's just pushing, and I thought it would be fun to just have that on a constant loop. I know I'm going to put a background in here, but I don't know exactly what I want to do for that yet, but that doesn't matter. One of the great things about animating in Adobe Fresco is that you can just sort of go at it one step at a time because each layer can have its own timeline. So I can just worry about this and then decide to add in stuff after the fact and just keep going without having a plan. And for me, not having a plan is a great thing. Because each layer can have its own timeline, what I'm going to do is separate the things based on what's going to be moving. So I think I want the body to stay still and just have that leg move and then maybe the eyes. I think that makes it funnier that it's not moving that much. But I do want it to just have that kind of energy, a little bit of wiggle to it. It's referred to as a line boil. So what I'm going to do is draw the body on its own and just draw it 3 times so that I can get that constant loop of motion. So we'll just loop that on the sequence, and then we can worry about the leg after the fact. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom right corner, click on the motion tools, and then you'll see this little timeline pop up. I'm just going to hit plus, and then you'll see that our original frame is grayed out so that we can see where it is, and that way I can use it as a guide to trace over to make my next one. And if you don't see that, you'll just go into your settings and make sure onion skin is turned on. Onion skin is the ability to see previous and next frames. So I'm just gonna trace this over. I'm not trying to make it different. I'm just tracing it as close as I can without being psychotic. And at this point, I'm gonna turn off my sketch layer so that I can just see this overall shape. Then I'll come back to this one. And then I will do one more frame. So we have 3. All right, so I drew all the shapes first just because it was all in red and I thought it would be easier. And now I will come back to my body layer and then draw in these features. All right, so now we can check this out again and see if our lines were too crazy. I think they're just crazy enough. I think this line on the nose may be a little much, but I think because it's such a long feature, I think it's kind of funny. I'm okay with that amount of jiggle. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and color in the arm, the rest of this nose, the eyes, the teethuses. Actually, I'm thinking that it would make sense to have this back leg that's standing on the skateboard and the board of the skateboard, not the wheels, all in the same layer, just to keep things simple. So I'm just gonna go in and draw in that leg and the skateboard deck. All right, so I finished up that sequence, got the body, got the skateboard deck, and instead of doing that outside pushing leg, I'm gonna give us a little bit of an easy win and show you how to do something super simple, and that is animating these spinning wheels. So I'm gonna turn my sketch back on so I can see my wheels, and then I'm gonna make a new layer, and on this layer, I'm gonna draw the wheel. Now all we need to do is go to Path, and then you'll see these effects pop up on the right side. I'm gonna go to where it says sway and choose a spin. And this wheel is just gonna start spinning around. So we can control how fast it spins by adjusting the frames. So we could bring this down, let's say, bring it down to 12. That's going pretty quickly. We can also increase the amount of times. So let's bring this down to 2. I think that is the right speed. Now there's something we can do to exaggerate that look a little bit more. So what I'm gonna do is pause this. I'm gonna fill this in with a color. I don't know. Well, let's go with a yellowy color. That'll be fun. And you know, these wheels are tiny and they're gonna be spinning the whole time, so we're not gonna see it. So what I'm gonna do is just sort of make like a little scribble like that. And now when we play this, that looping motion is exaggerated a bit more. And now for the other wheel, we can actually just duplicate this wheel because again, they're small and they're gonna just work fine like that. So if we come over to our layer over here, we can duplicate this, and now we can go to transform, and this is the important part. You want to go to layer content and motion paths here, transform this, and then we're gonna just drag it over here to the same position. And now if we hit play, we got both of our wheels spinning. And now we can come back to our monster layer, bring the opacity back up, and let's check it out. Now we got this skating monster. I feel like the line boil makes it, you know, look like he's moving too. It's like a little bit of vibration. And if you wanted to, you could just draw another leg in and you would have a fun little animation. Maybe some pupils, or it'd be creepy, but that's pretty much it. But we're gonna take it much further, as you know. Just wanna take a quick moment to let you know that this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey, tell them about our Skillshare classes. Did you know that Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives with thousands of... Tell them about the animated scene class. I know, I'm gonna get to it. The Fresco one, underwater, with the diver. Tell them about that one. What? You know what? Why don't you just do it? All right, fine, I'm happy to do it. Do better than you. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. This video is actually like a perfect little appetizer for my class, Easy Animation for Illustrators in Adobe Fresco. In that class, I show you how to create an animated scene, and I break down all the different steps, talk about how to combine frame-by-frame animation with motion paths. I think you're gonna like it. But hey, don't take my word for it. Let me read you a review from the class. Chris is a top bloke, and he is also user-friendly. So if you're like me and have only been doing animation drawing using Fresco for just like a week, I promise you'll be able to follow along and do some really fun and creative things. Thanks, Callum. All right, we got another one from Christy. Highly recommend. I've been wanting to turn some of my illustrations into animations for a while, but many of the classes make me feel overwhelmed with all I need to learn. With Chris's class, I was able to get an animation created in a couple of hours without stress or feeling like I was lost. He is engaging and fun, and his animation style is great. Thanks so much. That made me feel really good. Thank you for those reviews. Love this class. Chris's session engaging. Get on with it. I know, I'm gonna get to it. They're just not. Did you know Skillshare is the largest online platform for creatives with just a vast array of classes and topics like design, illustration, photography, video. There's all kinds of stuff. What else? Productivity, marketing, music. It's endless. Anything you want to know, there's some amazing classes on Skillshare. With the level of quality in a lot of these classes on Skillshare, it is not impossible for a dabbler to turn into a pro in just a matter of hours. So many classes on Skillshare are taught by industry leaders, just people at the top of their game. And the classes are taught in a learn by doing it manner, which is crucial for me. I don't know about you, but I can't just be watching a class and taking it all in without actually getting my hands in the mix and making something. And just because so many of these classes are taught by just creative heroes, creative hotshots, it doesn't mean that there aren't tons of classes that are perfect for beginners. Another great thing about Skillshare is it's like on-demand classes, so you can just kind of stack them up and learn at your own pace. Sneak them in when you can. In fact, I got a whole bunch queued up right now, and I think I'm gonna go check those out. Share the link. First 500 people to use my link in the description will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Back to you, Chris. The next step, which is this pushing leg, is going to be the most complicated part of this animation, and it's not even going to be that complicated. It's just going to involve a lot of frames. Now, the thing you need to remember about each layer having its own separate timeline is that in order for things to stay in sync, each timeline sequence, they need to be divisible by the same amount. So you have an illustration and you have 2 different timelines in there. One of your layers has 3-frame loop. You do another sequence that has 4 frames. The problem with this is that your 3-frame sequence will loop and then start over, but your 4-frame one is gonna go to 4 and then start over, and then they're gonna get out of sync. But let's say your second sequence had 6 frames. The first one is going to loop once, start over, and then get to 6. At the same time, the other one gets to 6, and then they're just going to stay in sync. So what I'm getting at here is I'm going to take this 3-frame sequence of the body, and I'm going to duplicate this sequence 4 times so that I have 12 frames to work with. This is what I do. So I tap on the first one, I go to duplicate frame, and then I drag it to the end of the sequence. Then I go to the second one, duplicate that frame, drag it to the end of the sequence. Then go to the third one, duplicate that frame, drag it to the end of the sequence. So I just keep doing it with the first 3 so that I know I'm repeating that first 3 over and over again. As you can see here, I have 12 frames down here, and that's just that 3-frame sequence duplicated 4 times. So as you play this, you see it looks exactly the same as it did when it was just 3 frames because it's just repeating through that cycle. So to figure out this leg motion, I'm gonna make a new layer so I can just sort of sketch it out first before I draw directly onto these frames. So I got that leg position, and what I'm gonna do now is make a new frame, and I'm gonna put that in front of the other one. And here I'm going to draw in what I think might be the starting position. So I'm gonna use the spot where that leg is coming out of the body as like the pivot spot. You can think of it as like the hip joint. And then I'm just gonna draw this leg lifted up like this, and then the foot like that. And part of why I think this is funny is just how much longer that leg is than the actual leg on the monster. I think that just exaggeration is funny. So now these are the 2 points. So what I'm gonna do now is draw the frames in between these to get that fluid motion. So the next frame I'm gonna do is the point where the leg is pushing off of the ground. There may be a frame in between and after, but those are like the main action points, and then the others are sort of like the filler frames in between that. So I'm thinking that would be maybe something like this. We want to get the foot on the ground with like a bend like that. So it's gonna go like that. So even just to like get a feel for it, you know, that's sort of the movement, but it's like, you know, way too fast. It's not the silly dramatic motion that we want. But those are the key moments. And then I'm gonna add a frame after that. And here I'm just sort of like working out what the movement is gonna be like. So maybe this one is just starting to push back. Just starting to get longer. We can see what that looks like. And that's kind of funny. Okay, and so I think we should do a frame in between the first position and then the bottom, so like halfway down maybe. So we can see what that's like. See that stagger right there? That's what I'm talking about the amount of frames not syncing up. So right now we have 5 frames here, so it's gonna get to 10 and then start over, whereas our other sequence has 12 frames. So that's why it's doing that weird stutter. You'll see it lines up for 2 and then stutters at 3. Okay, so I know I want this last one to be pretty exaggerated, so I want it to hold there. So maybe let's try one that's like in between these two to just exaggerate that full push. And let's actually turn off the sketch so that we don't have to think about that for the moment. All right, I think that movement is pretty funny, but now I don't want it to happen all the time. So I'm thinking let's duplicate that extended leg a bit and then duplicate the first one a couple times. Then maybe this last one more time. Let's see what that looks like. So I think that's sort of the silly movement that I was hoping for. And it looks a little bit static now, but that's just because we're duplicating frames, and when we hand draw each of those frames, it's gonna have that sort of motion that we want. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw these all onto my body layer that we have 12 frames for. Okay, so I went in and I tightened up the leg drawing and colored it in. I decided to keep it on its own layer just to keep things a little bit more flexible, but I still want to move the body a little bit as the leg pushes, but we can still do that because we have the same amount of frames for each one. So I will show you this sequence real quick. So basically what we did, I just sort of tightened it up a little bit. And as you can see, it has a lot more energy now that it's all hand drawn and has that little bit of a line boil. Let me go ahead and turn on the monster and the wheels, and we can see it all together. I think it looks pretty good. I just want to go ahead and shift that body a little bit as the push happens. So this is super simple. We're just going to click on that monster layer, and then we're going to go to the frame where it happens. So right there, the leg is on the ground. So what I'm going to do is go over to transform, and then we just want to make sure we have frame selected and not all frames. So I'm going to hit transform, and now what we can do is just shift that body up and forward a tiny bit, and then we can go to the next frame and maybe just sort of match that a little bit. And then on the 6th frame, I'm just gonna move it in between those just so it's sort of like a little bit of a subtle transition back. Now let's see it all together. Looks good to me. What do you think? I went in and drew some pupils here. This monster looking forward, looking a little concerned. So because these are just quick little circles, I'm just gonna draw them all because I think it'll be easier and just, that's why. And let's see what this looks like. I think that's pretty funny. Okay, we're ready to move on to the background. The background is gonna be a lot easier. Okay, so I went ahead and drew in this sort of organic abstract shape, and this is gonna be the sort of frame that this whole little world, this little monster is skating through, is gonna exist in. But I wanted that to have movement too, so I just drew 6 frames of this where it just sort of wiggles a little bit because I wanted it to just have some sort of fluid motion, if that makes sense. All right, so now I'm just gonna draw a road for this little guy to scoot down. I'm gonna rotate my canvas just because it's easier for me to do a straight vertical line. And I'm just gonna draw all the way through the whole composition and then hold and snap the line to get it straight. I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna fill that in like that. And now I'm gonna trace this 2 times to get that line boil. You know what we're doing. We've done this a bunch now. So I'm gonna hit new frame, and I'm not gonna snap with this one because then it'll be perfect. I'm just gonna try to trace it as well as I can. Okay, and we can fill that in, and now we can test that out. That's just the right amount of movement. Now, here's one of the things that makes Adobe Fresco pretty great for this kind of thing. We can make our animation a clipping mask. So I can tap on this road layer and then click this clipping mask button, and it's gonna clip it to that shape below, and now our road is existing only within this little organic land we've created. And to really sell this road, we're gonna make a dashed line on the road, and we're not even gonna have to do a dashed line. I'm just gonna draw 1 rectangle. What do you think about that? Let's make a new layer. We're just gonna draw a simple dashed line. Give it a little bit of perspective to sell that road a little bit. That's looking good. And now what we're gonna do is put this on a motion path. So we're gonna click on path, and with the motion path tool, you just draw a path that you want this thing to follow. So I'm just going to draw a path through the whole composition like that. And now you'll see our line goes through, but you'll say, hey, there's lots of lines. We wanted a dashed line, not one thing. Well, that's another way that Adobe Fresco makes this super easy. So over here in our effects setting, we can choose add multiples. Then we can just pull in as many as it takes to get that dashed line looking good. So what we want to do is just make sure our sequence is in the same divisibleness of our frames. And 48 is, right? Because 12 times 4 is 48, I believe. Yes, that is true. I'm being told that is correct. So we're gonna hit pause, and we are going to come over to our layer, and we are going to make that a clipping mask to our road, which is also a clipping mask to this shape. And now, just would you look at it? So easy. All right, so I went ahead and I drew a mountain range and some clouds for our background. That will just help. I think the clouds are gonna flow nicely through the background. So what I'm gonna do is just like we did before, I'm gonna click on path, and now I'm gonna draw a long path. I'm gonna rotate this, that goes farther than the end of our thing because I want it to sort of go slow and just sort of like loop longer because I want to have some other stuff coming through the scene. So what I'm going to do is, let's increase this to, well, let's say, what's 12 times 12? 144. What I'm going to do is also add another set of them by going to 2 on the multiples. And this way, there's always going to be clouds, but they'll sort of be changing a little bit. So before I turn on the monster to test this out, I'm going to make this also a clipping mask so it goes within our little scene, and we can turn on the monster. And let's see if these clouds feel like they are correct with the movement. And I think they are. I think it's looking pretty good. So we got this mountain range that I drew. I'm gonna turn this back on and I'm gonna drag it down below the road because I want it to be behind the road. And I think that's looking pretty good. The mountain range is far away, so I don't want it to be like, you know, moving through the scene because, you know, a mountain range in the far distance wouldn't be doing that. But I think we can give it a little bit of movement. So what I'm gonna do is click on path, and then I'm gonna turn on grow shrink, and then just maybe bump it up a little bit and see what that looks like. So as you can see here, it just sort of like undulates a little bit and just has some movement to it. And I think that paired with everything else is gonna look pretty good. All right, I went a little crazy and drew a bunch of little elements to put in here. We got this little foreground bush. I got this billboard that says dang. I got this red bush, but a green, I don't know, forest, purple forest. Got all this stuff. And as I mentioned, the ability to have a different timeline on each layer is just such a great feature for this kind of thing because we can make this so dynamic by having things moving at different speeds very easily. So I'm just gonna make paths for these things and offset them a little bit so they're traveling at different speeds. It's sort of an experimental process. We'll start with this little one in the foreground. So this is closest to us, so it should be moving the fastest, and it's like a little bush that we're going by. That's looking pretty good, but I think it's a little bit too low. So what I can do is tap on path here and go to transform path, and then I can just shift it up a little bit like that. And now when we play it, you'll see it comes into the scene a little bit more. What we need to do now is just pull that down so it can get clipped to our road. We want to make sure it is above our yellow line, and let's see what that looks like. I think that's pretty good. Let's move on. So the billboard is a pretty prominent feature, and it shouldn't be in the scene a lot. Like, it shouldn't be constantly rotating because it'll kind of throw things off because it's more recognizable. So I want this to be a long path. Obviously, it is flying right now. Position is correct though, I think. So what we can do is in our path settings, we can just bring the frames way out to 192, which is divisible by 12 because I checked beforehand. So now as you can see, it's going slow. And because that path is so long, it's not constantly in our scene. We see it every now and then, like he's going around the planet. So what we can do is drag that down below the road so the posts get covered a little bit. And now it is in our little world. We got stuff happening. We got the foreground bush. We got that. It's looking good. Let's add more stuff. See, now they're offset, but they're not traveling at the exact same speed, so they sort of catch up a little bit with each other. We got that foreground thing. I'm loving that. I think this is pretty good. Now I want to add in one little extra detail just because I think it would be a nice feature, and that's just going to be a frame by frame little motion doodle that goes over the top of everything, because I want something to come in front of this little monster, but I won't be able to do that and have it clipped to this little world because the monster's on top of that world. Okay, so I drew in this little sequence of just sort of two lines that just come in and out of the scene. And I just sort of made an organic path through the scene and just kind of moved it one step at a time. It's pretty simple. It's just, you know, a squiggly little line. Nothing much to it, but when you play it, I think it adds a nice little whimsical feel to the whole thing. The only issue is I don't want it to be happening constantly. I want it to just be sort of a little thing that happens once in a while, sort of like the billboard. So in order to do that, what I'm gonna do is just come down to the end and just insert a bunch of blank frames. And again, I'll just bring it up to something divisible by 12, like let's say 24. Let's try that. So now it comes through the scene, then comes back in. I think that's nice. The only thing I want to do now is put a darker background on it. I think it'll look better on black. I'll try that out. I think it'll just make everything pop a little bit. Let's hit play. I like it. This was fun. I think this is fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyone else just noticed that my road lines are going backwards? Gotta fix that. Luckily, because this is on its own separate layer, this is actually another reason why this is such an amazing feature. Imagine if you messed this up in Procreate and you had this in a whole bunch of different groups. Holy moly. Here, all we gotta do is find that layer with our path, which is right here, and we can go to Transform Path. We can just grab this little rotate thing here, spin it around, lock that in 180, and now we're going the right way. Why didn't you guys tell me that earlier? So if you made it this far, you're probably in two different situations. One, you're like, wow, I didn't even know you could do this kind of stuff in Fresco. I've never even used Fresco. And if that's you, I got a whole playlist here that is a perfect introduction to everything you need to know about Adobe Fresco. On the other side, you may be like, hey, I've been using Fresco and I like it, but I didn't know about these motion tools. I got another playlist that is all about the motion features in Adobe Fresco. You could check that out over here. Either way, I got playlists aplenty. All right, good talk. Thank you. And also, thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Love the Skillshare. Hear my cat meowing? Hey, Werner. I'm trying to do YouTubes here. Ever heard of it?